At the time this video is released, it's the 1 year anniversary since the passing of Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. Now, I started writing these weekly video essays in response to my negative feelings around his passing, and I've genuinely found it quite helpful writing about my beloved show, Batman the Animated Series. Usually I'd make a video looking at the psychological motivations of one of the villains from the show, or highlight some of the deeper meaning behind some of the individual episodes. But today, in memory of Kevin Conroy, I want to take a look at his favourite episode, the one that he felt summed up the psychology of Batman better than any other episode. Let's talk about I've Got Batman in My Bed. I'm kidding. No, it's Perchance to Dream. If you're watching this video, I assume you've seen Perchance to Dream, because I'm going into spoiler territory pretty quickly. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it now, and then continue with this video. Something I think we should establish from the outset is that Kevin Conroy was a classically trained theatrical actor. He studied at Juilliard, a prestigious acting school in New York, earning himself a scholarship straight out of high school, which was apparently no mean feat. By his own admission, he had no knowledge of Batman before landing this role. As a theatrical actor, Conroy had a lot of experience performing the works of William Shakespeare. And this episode's title, Perchance to Dream, is a direct reference to a soliloquy from Shakespeare's play Hamlet, specifically the line, "To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in this sleep of death, what dreams may come." At this point in the play, Hamlet is asking himself if it would be better to just give up and kill himself rather than face his troubles, but he worries about what might be on the other side. This reference immediately signposts the ending of the episode, with Batman committing suicide in the dream world in order to wake up in reality. Another big signpost for fans of the show is that the episode's title card theme is the Mad Hatter's theme. And those of us with the score from the show burned into our brains would immediately identify him as the villain, just based on this track alone. It's actually kind of unusual for a show to reuse a specific track. Yes, Shirley Walker and her band of composers were big fans of thematic music and would reference villains' themes across all of their appearances, but it would usually be worked into a separate piece of music rather than just being reused without any changes. The only other time I can think of this happening is in the episode Fear of Victory, which reuses a lot of the music from Nothing to Fear. I have to wonder if this is simply the reality of their tight schedule. Perhaps they simply didn't have time to compose an entirely new title card theme for this episode, and just opted to use the Mad Hatter's theme. Maybe it was a deliberate choice to signal what was going on to the most hardcore fans. I honestly don't know, and maybe I should ask around. So it's interesting to see this direct parallel to Shakespeare's Hamlet, because Kevin Conroy had noted the similarities between Batman and Hamlet during his initial audition. Now, I have to admit that I'm not that familiar with Hamlet and don't really enjoy the works of Shakespeare. I know, blasphemy. I think it's because they forced us to read it in school, and I just can't get past that connection with forced learning. But even with my basic knowledge of the play, there are some key differences between Batman and Hamlet. Firstly, yes, Hamlet mourns his father, the King of Denmark, after he'd been murdered by his brother. Hamlet dons dark clothing and skulks around graveyards feeling sorry for himself, pontificating on the futility of being alive. Yeah, okay, sounds a little bit like Batman, sure. But Hamlet is a very passive character. He mostly just reacts to the world around him. He spends a lot of time talking about taking vengeance, but he only acts after he's been stabbed with a poisoned sword and his mother has drank from a poisoned chalice. If he didn't act then, well, he'd be dead and never have the opportunity to do so. He literally waits until the very last possible second to enact his revenge. And in a way, that is the tragedy of Hamlet. He knew what needed to be done, it's just he spent too long navel-gazing. And Batman is, broadly speaking, the opposite of that. He proactively stalks the streets of Gotham City, looking for wrongdoers so that he can feel like he's making Gotham a safer place. The tragedy of Batman, at least the BTAS version, is that he was never able to solve the murder of his parents. He never found out who did it. He never brought them to justice, leaving him with this never-ending compulsion to save other people as a way of atoning for his perceived inaction as a child. He blames himself for what happened to his parents, even though there's no possible way he could have intervened. He was, after all, just a boy. In a weird coincidence, as I'm writing this script, BTAS director Kevin Altieri has just posted this drawing of Batman, the Joker and Harley Quinn, clearly inspired by Hamlet. In this drawing we can see that it's actually the Joker that is portraying Hamlet, holding Yorick's skull, which in this case is a bomb, while Harley Quinn emotes in the background. Batman is very clearly not Hamlet, instead he sits bound in Yorick's grave. Or is it Ophelia's grave? As I said, I'm not that familiar with Hamlet, so feel free to correct me in the comments. Anyway, given that connection to Shakespeare and Conroy's status as a classically trained trained stage actor, it's unsurprising that he would latch on to this episode. As an aside, when Kevin Conroy appeared on Michael Rosenbaum's Inside of You podcast, he recounted how Shakespeare's Julius Caesar brought him out of his shell in high school, and led to him discovering his love of acting. Kevin Conroy clearly loved Shakespeare as much as I love B-Test, so it's easy to understand why he'd frame his perception of Batman that way. Right, so let's stop talking about Shakespeare and get back to the episode. Another thing that was really appealing to Conroy about this episode was the fact that he played several different roles in the episode. He was Batman, Bruce Wayne, Thomas Wayne, and the imposter Batman, giving him lots of material to work with, and it even allowed him to act opposite himself. So the quick summary of the narrative is that one day, Batman wakes up to find himself in a world where he is not Batman. What's more, his parents are still alive, and he's engaged to Selina Kyle. It's also important to note that Batman does still exist, he just isn't Bruce. I find that last point very psychologically revealing. Batman's fantasy life is very much grounded in reality. It's not a wild fantasy wonderland where there's no crime and therefore no need for Batman. It's just what might have happened had his parents not been shot. Aside from not being Batman, much of his day-to-day life remains the same, except Selina Kyle actually wants to be with him. Perhaps this was part of the Dream Machine's coding to come up with believable fantasy worlds rather than fulfilling every possible desire. Imagine if Batman woke up one day and found himself in a happy clappy world of sunshine and rainbows. He'd reject it within seconds. I prefer the idea though that Batman is so logical and so grounded that he would immediately see through the deception if the world didn't have a Batman running around it terrorizing criminals. He's so jaded that he can't even imagine a believable world where there is no crime. And this is a nice insight into what Batman really wants. He wants a family and a boring life with someone else picking up the responsibility of being Batman. Think back to Mask of the Phantasm, where Batman is constantly looking at that portrait of his parents, holding them up as the gold standard of relationship goals, something he aspires to. He doesn't want to be Batman. It's a curse. He is Batman because of his compulsion to help. Upon learning that he's in a dream world, Batman gives up this potential life with his parents because it's not real. He'd rather live in the real world and be miserable than blissfully ignorant. Incidentally, despite what they say in this episode, it is possible to read in your dreams. It's just that I'm damned if I could ever do it. I think the power of suggestion from this episode is just too strong. So Batman's method of escaping this dream world is to fling himself from atop a tower, falling to his death. Now this is clearly a kid's show, so they couldn't show anything too graphic, but I really like this scene where Batman figures out how to escape. He's so cold and logical, but if it does turn out that he's wrong, frankly he doesn't care. We just see Bruce tumbling through the darkness towards his eventual escape. Incidentally, a small change was made to the script. When the Mad Hatter asks Batman what he'll do if he's wrong,
"Then I'll see you in your nightmares."
In the original script he said, "Then I'll see you in hell." But the censors provided feedback saying, "The network has a problem with Bruce's line." Once Bruce is free from the dream world, he's able to confront the Mad Hatter, who is absolutely incredulous that not only was Batman able to escape from the dream world, but that he would reject this gift. From the Mad Hatter's perspective, happiness is the most important thing, and he was willing to give Batman whatever he wanted in order to stop Batman from thwarting his own attempts at happiness. And it's very interesting to note that the Mad Hatter had Batman completely at his mercy. He could have done anything he wanted to Batman. He could have taken off his mask and learned his secret identity, could have lopped his head off, but he doesn't care about any of that. He knew that Batman was the only thing stopping him from fulfilling his dreams and inflicting his will on others. To Batman, this fantasy world was torture. It was the embodiment of everything he had lost, of a life he could have had, but never would. Batman has a more grounded, pragmatic approach to life, while the Mad Hatter only cares about his own selfish gratification. Perchance the Dream isn't my favourite episode. The references to the work of Shakespeare don't particularly tickle me, and some of the wonkiness in the animation I find a bit distracting. Look at how cross-eyed Bruce Wayne looks here. But it's still an excellent episode, and a great spotlight for the talent of our dear departed Kevin Conroy. Okay, so that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave comments, all that stuff. You know how YouTube works. I have also enabled the super thanks button, so if you really liked it and you have the means, feel free to throw a buck or two my way. It will really help. I also want to give a shout out to Cat Strike, who produced my new music. I've been doing these video essays for almost a year now, so I thought it was about time that I freshened things up. This is the first of a few changes that are incoming that will result in better videos for you.